As you can see from whenever we first recorded that I have actually made the base larger. You can go as large as you want or as small as you want. But once you get the base to where you want it, you take the pine needles in for the sake of time and making it a little easier when you're first starting, or at least it was for me. You take 7 of the bundles of, well, 7 pine needles. And the reason I take 7 is because I look at it like there's 7 directions, and then also you're looking out for the 7th generation. So what you do is when you stop at the base of where you want it, you loop the thread over the 7 and then put it right on the edge. And then you sew up through the bottom to connect it, because now what you're doing is building the sides up, and you want to go twice to make sure that they're held in place. And then as you go around, you use your fingers to hold it in place. Then you sew over, and you try to go as close as you can to the bottom of the thread where you stop to make it uniform. And you just keep sewing, and as you sew, and as you see, when you get closer to the end of your thread, sometimes it'll pull out. So you spread it back through and just start where you stopped. And when you first do this, it's easier just to make sure that the round part of your base is when you make a circle, it would be the same length as where the pine needles stop. But I'll show you how you do it from there, because when I get around to it, I'll show you what it does. And this is a little easier for me because I have spent hours, and I mean hours, doing this to start with. And as I mentioned before, when you first start doing it, your fingers are going to cramp like crazy. And you see where I've actually run out of thread to where I can't go any further with this one. Just for time's sake, I already had another needle threaded. And what you'll do is you come up here where the thread ended, and you come up through there. And these are little tricks I learned along the way. What you do is you don't leave that thread on the end. What you do, you'll hook it up under the bundle of needles, and the end of the thread that ended, you come close and you put your thumb on both of them, not only to make sure that they're out of the way when you're sewing, is to also hold the one that you just looped through so that it won't pull through whenever you tighten it. And then after that, it's just automatically linked in. You don't have to tie any knots in it. You don't have to do anything to it other than just that first time when it comes through. Just make sure you hold it down with your thumb next to the one that you just finished. And as you see, I'm using my fingers to form the circle around the base. Once again, make sure you're staying close to the bottom of the thread that's at the base. Don't be surprised or disappointed when you first start, because until you get used to doing this, it's going to be very loose. And also, like I said, make sure that your pine needles are not green but kind of cured, and depending on how many you're going to add. And also make sure that you store them. I found out that it's a whole lot easier if you store them in a large tote, the plastic totes, because it'll keep the green color longer. It will fade over time because it'll turn kind of yellow, and then eventually it will be the brown. But what turns them brown is if you just leave them out in the air completely. And if they get brown, they get dry. And this is whenever they turn from pine needles to pine straw. But there's a way you can fix that as well. If they get too dry, what you do is wrap them in a wet paper towel for about an hour. And also I have put them in a glass of water. Make sure the ends are down, but don't completely submerge them, just about up to here. And I've left them in the glass with the water until the water has evaporated. And also you'll see some of this loose on the end of the pine needles. Before you even start, just hold it and just peel this off, because you want it to be nice and uniform. And what you can do is, found this little trick too, that if you just clip the end off of it, you can pull the end off and they're still together, and then you can just thread up under here that keeps it together without all of these hanging out, because you need to make it kind of uniform. And I didn't measure the needles with my base, so. And you can do this ahead of time too, and just thread them through the ends of what's already there, and you can't even tell where it stopped and where it started. And just for time's sake, I'm just going to put 3 in there to show, and then once I go back and do another one, I'll just show the different stages of how it looks when it's completely finished. And once again, I said depending on the size of your needle will depend on the size of the thread that you go through. To start with, you probably need a much larger needle that has a larger hole, and that way your sinew or your thread or your raffia, whatever you're using, makes it easier to get it finished too. And don't be disappointed if the first couple of ones that you do are kind of loose, because I've got some that are so loose you could probably read a newspaper through them. But once I worked with it a while, I got better at it. And that's the thing about the pine needles. It's really time consuming to be able to make something. But the good thing about it is, unlike the clay, you have to make a uniform shape of what you're going to make to begin with before you get to the stopping stage. Because once it gets too dry and you're making something, that's it. You're just going to have to stick with that shape unless you keep scraping. The good thing about the pine needles is you can start making something and just put it aside. It's not going to hurt anything for it to sit for a while before you come back to it. And when you get to here, to where it started, you can clip this off. That's too long, but make sure you come over enough to where it's not just stopping right here where you started, but cut it at an angle. To where it'll come up to the top without adding extra to the top. And then you come back over and wrap it here. And go back over the same area that you did the first time. Once again, hold your thumb here where it ended to hold it tight and in place. Like I say, and just go over the same thread that's already there. And you hold it with your thumb, and once again, your thumb and this finger are the most important fingers to hold things in place once you get to where you can make it go a little faster. Once again, the 7. Come down past where your last one was to build your next wall. And this is where you concentrate on what you're doing and you forget to talk. But like I say, it's basically the same thing. Once you can kind of get into a rhythm in it after a while. Mm-hmm. Hopefully there'll be some out there that watch later that'll be obsessed with it like I am right now. And it makes it easier too whenever you're doing this, especially doing it this way. Whenever you separate the sinew to make it small, just wrap it around something to keep it separate. I learned that the hard way too, because I just pulled them off and laid it down, and then when you try to pick them up, it's tangled around pine needles, and everything else that you got laying close by. And as before, when you pull it through, you don't go all the way down to the bottom each time that you add a row. You just sew it to the top row that you're putting it on. And once again, like I say, pull both up, the thread that just ran out and the one you just threaded in, so that this will be tight and also that it won't pull through with the one that you just started sewing with. And also make sure that the thread that when you're going around it, make sure you keep it on this side of you, because if you leave it this way, it's going to hang on the one that you just added. And you see, I'm going to run out again, but then you can also use the ones that you cut. But you see, it only comes to the bottom of the first row that you did. So you'll come back and add more. But even though you start out with the 7 altogether, but whenever you start feeding the other needles to it, just do one at a time. That way you still have your same thickness, but it won't be bulky. Remember, cut at the ankle. So it will fold over and blend in with the row you just added. As you see, that's how it sometimes hooks between those, the loose ends. So but just building up as you go. So I'll stop here now while we're filming, and then I'll finish it, and then we'll come back and we'll show you a finished product.